Earlier on, we spoke to Brian Statham, founder of Brian Statham Associates. Very good evening to you, Mr. Statham. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Perhaps let's just first start with the main aim of the summit, particularly in the climate that we find ourselves in, not only here in South Africa, but globally as well.
Good evening. Good evening to everybody who's listening in. We have, this is in the context of Africa as a continent. And Africa has a number of key issues that it has to deal with from an energy point of view. The first one is clearly the problem of the 600 odd million Africans who do not have access to any form of energy at all from in a commercial sense. They're all chopping down trees and burning trees and things like that to get energy. So that's a very critical priority in a context that we have to put in place. The second one is that we need to be cognizant that over time we must move to a lower carbon footprint in order to deal with the questions of global warming. Now, it's not clear what pace that transition will take place at. It may be slower or it may be faster than people predict, but it will happen over time. It really depends on how technology take-up happens across the continent, and that will be dependent on how much support we get from technology partners that come from within the continent and from outside the continent. And funding, of course, will be a critical consideration. And then the third thing that we have to look at is the so-called just energy transition, which means that every citizen in the continent is entitled to an acceptable lifestyle. Now, in that context, we talk about energy and energy's contribution. And energy doesn't have any value per se in itself. Energy's value lies in the way it enables things to happen. And if you've got good energy systems, you can get good healthcare, you can get good education, you can get good communication, you can get good mobility, you can start getting your goods to market, you can start interacting on the internet and trading, and all these things that can happen that change the social development and the economic development of a community and allow that community to prosper. And so we have to look at everything we do through those three lenses. Will it help with the energy access for the 600 million? Will it help get us towards a lower carbon future? And will it enable the citizens of the continent to ultimately prosper and develop socially and economically? So that's the objectives of this event.
Okay, now the conference
we bring together people from all over the continent.
And that's what I was going to talk about. The conference is an opportunity for various stakeholders to engage. It bills itself as a platform that allows for honest and open conversations. But the issue of inclusivity has been raised, particularly in the design of solutions. We saw the Mineral Resources and Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe's address being interrupted by Greenpeace Africa activists, and they're mainly saying that they've been left out on some of the more pivotal issues. What are your thoughts about this, and how much can it improve the situation, particularly given the fact that with climate change and some of the energy solutions that we're seeking, communities have felt that not only have their lives been disrupted, but their livelihoods and environment disrupted as well?
Well, that's precisely what this conference is trying to deal with, is to come up with solutions and systems and things that will make sure that communities are in fact catered for, that communities are engaged. And the conference is not exclusive. People can engage with the folks on the conference. It was the whole basis of the conference was a basis of dialogue. So we had panel discussions, and the panels themselves interacted with the delegates to the conference, and there was to and fro of questions and answers and discussion. And that's the whole ethos of the Energy Indaba, is to allow all points of view to be heard and to allow them to engage with one another, share the good stories, share the bad experiences, and learn from one another. Because there's no one person or no one body that has the perfect solution and the perfect answer. And if we don't have a culture of learning from one another and drawing on each other's experiences and being sensitive to each other's needs, then we're not going to make any progress. And
Let's
so
talk about
people who
progress.
take a hard line on one end of the spectrum or another end of the spectrum, they're not helping the debate, because everybody has a valid view.
There obviously are investors and exhibitors at this conference. We heard the minister saying that solving the energy crisis would require improving the energy availability factor of power stations. We know this, yes, but some on the sidelines or watching the conference who are also participating are saying South Africa has to make serious moves towards a hydrogen economy. What else is being tabled as a viable solution that is not too medium to long term?
Well, there was a long discussion about that in terms of what's the most economic solution. And the suggestion is that if you are building new capacity, then wind and solar are very competitive with coal or gas, and in some cases, in some jurisdictions, are even much cheaper than them. But in a South African context, the cheapest option is to repair and get our coal-fired power station back up and running to solve the short-term problem. That's the cheapest option, and that will, if we can get that right, we can handle the load shedding, and then we can get the system stable. Once the system is stable, then we can talk about the trajectory going forward as to how coal will ultimately be phased out, gas will be phased in, and other renewables will be. And do that on a sensible and controlled and managed trajectory. Bearing in mind what I've said earlier, that we must not leave any citizens behind. So those citizens who make their living out of one or other technology need to be taken into consideration.
Mr. Statham, thank you so much for your time. Brian Statham is the founder of Brian Statham Associates, an energy consultancy firm that is also taking part in the Africa Energy Indaba. They're also part of the steering committee, just outlining some of the discussions there. Of course, it continues. We will bring you more as and when we're here.